Fire Emblem, one of the most recognizable tactics games out there. Each new entry to the series introduces new gameplay mechanics or improvements on old concepts, keeping every new game fresh and unique from its predecessor. And with these new mechanics comes its own unique story, some being a hit or miss sometimes. And of course, you can't have a good story without well-written characters that players can relate to or simply develop some kind of emotional attachment to. Usually this involves following the protagonist on his or her journey and witnessing how their actions affect the other characters around them, whether that be friends or foes and vice versa. What's up guys, Tactics here with another video for you. Today, I'm going to be doing just that, focusing on the 7 of the best Fire Emblem lords in the entire series. Believe me when I say that there are countless good characters in Fire Emblem games that are not lords, but every story has to have some kind of protagonist that draws the plot forward. So that's why I'm sticking to just the lords for now. Also, please understand that yes, this is my own personal opinion, so if your favorite lord doesn't make the cut on my list, feel free to let me know who your favorite lords are in the comments below. Alright, let's not waste any more time and dive right in, starting off with number 7. We have the man that started it all, Marth. That's right, there was no way I could start this list off without having Marth on it. When you take into account that without him, Fire Emblem wouldn't even be as recognizable as it is today. My first experience with the Fire Emblem series came directly from Smash Bros. Melee, honestly, where Marth made his debut in the ever-growing colorful roster of characters. Honestly, when I saw him for the first time, I was excited to get another sword-wielding character in a game like Smash Bros. When you consider that the first one was all about the art of, well, just throwing hands. Link was pretty much the only character that had a sword at the time, but now when you look at the roster of Smash Ultimate, there are a ton of characters that use swords now, probably a bit too many in fact.
So you return, and sooner than expected. I see. Too many swordsmen, are there? And you wield the sword as well? What will you do? How is this?
But anyways, back to Marth though. I do think that his design was very cool. As the oldest lord in the Fire Emblem series, Marth has undergone many redesigns throughout Fire Emblem's history. His very first design had him in what looks like a skirt, like he's about to hit the field and do a cheer for us or something. So I'm glad they put my man in some actual cool looking armor, because if not for Sakurai's redesign, I'm not sure Marth would have been able to make it back into Smash with Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Let's not forget the games that Marth himself has been in with the Fire Emblem series, the first one being Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. And then he was also in the third game, Mystery of the Emblem. The remake of Shadow Dragon gave all the characters another redesign, and I can't really say that the art style was the best choice in the series, but still better than the original for sure. Either way, Marth is an iconic character amongst the lords in the series, even being in the most recent entry, Fire Emblem Engage, as the main emblem ring with the most screen time. Plus, then you have Lucina, the fake Marth in Awakening, whose design was based off of Marth, since her whole lineage is supposedly linked to Marth's bloodline. It just goes to show that Marth will forever be the face of the Fire Emblem series.
You are the ocean's gray waves, destined to seek life beyond the shore, just out of reach. Yet the waters ever change, flowing like time, the path is yours to climb.
Now, as much as I crap on Fire Emblem Fates, I do like some of the characters in this game, and honestly, I think Takumi is far more interesting than the main character Corrin. Corrin is such a bland protagonist, and it's almost like the devs realized this so they had to find another character with a more interesting storyline to them, and that is where Takumi comes into play. Fates is an interesting Fire Emblem game in the series since the game has 3 branching paths, each with a certain roster of characters that you get to command as you progress through the corresponding path. The only major problem that I have with this is the fact that each branching path is its own separate game that you have to pay money for. There's Birthright, and then you have Conquest, and then finally they wrap up the story with the DLC story Revelations. And even though you can chalk each game up to be sort of like this kind of what if story, like what if Corrin chose to become evil and join the Norian army, or what if he chose to strike out on his own and not choose either of these 2 kingdoms. Regardless of how you view it, each game will have its sort of story beats where it will feel like there's just a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing, and you won't really be able to get the full context of it unless you play the other version of the game. Like I said, each path is its own separate game, and I played through Birthright first, loved the music of Birthright, but found the story to just be as mediocre as the main character. It felt like your typical good versus evil trope, and of course, you being the good guys. Birthright Takumi was rather tame, I would say. He was still super hot-headed and quick to question Corrin's decision in certain moments, but overall nothing too out of the ordinary for him. He was clearly the lord the devs put the most time into his character and even his storyline. However, Conquest Takumi is where he becomes a bit unhinged. After you betray your Hoshidan allies and side with Nor, Takumi vows to take revenge on you for betraying them and will stop at nothing to make you pay for your decisions. It's only later into the Norian path that you realize something isn't quite right with Takumi. My man starts tweaking and a sinister aura begins surrounding him. Once you defeat him and the Hoshidan forces in chapter 23, Takumi becomes so enraged that he is completely taken over by an evil unknown force, which makes him throw himself off the border wall, presumably to his death. However, he comes back at the end, of course, of the game completely enveloped by the evil energy. You learn that Takumi actually died a long time ago and was taken over by Anakos, probably around the time of the Siege of Daya. It's a tragic realization because you don't really find out why this happened to Takumi, particularly in Conquest, unless you buy the DLC Revelation, which is where most of my disdain for Fates comes from. To fully understand the context of the story, you have to buy the game 3 goddamn times. Like what is this shit? This ain't Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all. I shouldn't need to buy 3 versions of a game like Fire Emblem to understand the complete story of it. Okay, let me just calm down a little bit. My objective was not to crap on this game today, okay? So, Takumi is a tragic lord that really suffers greatly because of your decisions in Conquest, making you kind of feel like you're responsible for his inevitable death. And it just really makes you feel like the bad guy since you could have prevented his death. Or at least that's how it felt to me since I played Birthright first and grew quite fond of Takumi. But overall, it was actually really cool to get a lord in Fire Emblem that specializes in the bow for a change, much like with our next lord on the list. Most Fire Emblem main characters usually wield a sword, making them hardly any different from one another at the beginning of the game. However, oftentimes these characters grow stronger and become more proficient in the sword. Eventually, they're promoted into a high lord or something like that and gain the ability to wield a secondary weapon. For example, Ike learns to use axes much like his father, or Hector learns to use swords. The same can be said about Our Lady of the Plains, Lyn, at number 5. Lyn is one of the badass female characters on this list. She's the first character you command in Blazing Sword after saving a no-name strategist in her homeland. Now, Lyn's design stood out to me the moment I saw her character, giving me this sort of nomadic attire that really fits her character and swordplay. She's extremely agile and has the ability to easily double attack most enemies, not to mention she gets her own signature weapon very early into her story. Plus, she has a really high crit rate. Once you promote her to her second class, she gains the ability to use bows, increasing her range of options to handle enemy units from both afar and in close quarters. She's a very kind and caring young woman with virtue and a great sense of integrity. And even though she has a kind demeanor about her, it doesn't mean she can't hang with the big boys like Hector and Ellie would. In fact, I would argue that she's probably the best female lord in the series. It's a shame that her character doesn't get to be fleshed out like some of the others on this list, but definitely one of my favorite units I love to use to just tear through enemy units in Blazing Sword. I was very happy to see her make a return in the form of an emblem ring in Fire Emblem Engage, and even be an assist trophy in the Smash Bros series. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, Eliwood was the only lord from Blazing Sword that didn't return as an emblem ring in Engage. Goddamn, I guess he really was the most forgettable of the trio though. I actually had a hard time determining which of these next two entries to put at number 4 and number 3, mainly because one of these characters I hold in high regard on a personal level of what the character meant to me. As for my other reason, it was mainly because of the sort of game that he just comes from and what it meant to the series. But I had to go with my gut and put him at number 4, and that being Robin from Fire Emblem Awakening. Now, if you know anything about my channel, I praise Fire Emblem Awakening to be probably the best Fire Emblem game in the series, since it was the game that took Fire Emblem out of the shadows and made it popular as it is today. And that's not to discredit any of the other entries in the series, because there are definitely some good games out there besides Awakening, like Three Houses. And if you haven't seen my other Fire Emblem video of the 7 best Fire Emblem games in the series, I highly recommend it. But like I said, Awakening is basically the game that brought Fire Emblem out of the shadows and into the light. Couple all that together with great gameplay mechanics like the pair-up system, the story being relatively decent, and of course it also being a bit of a dating sim game, which I wasn't expecting to have in a Fire Emblem game. Robin is probably the most unique lore in Fire Emblem, besides another character that really gave you this sort of feeling of him being this magic swordsman. My man could wield swords and magic at the same time. Now, similar to the no-name strategist that Lynn saves in her homeland, that then goes on to command an army, aka you as the player, Robin is picked up by Chrom and his sister. However, this time, instead of him just being some sort of insert for the player, Robin is a real unit you control and fight with on the battlefield. He's known for his lightning spells and was the character that made the spell Thoron look pretty damn cool. In previous games, Thoron was used as a long-range spell that mages could only use a few times, but Awakening turned it into a mid to long-range attack. Let's not forget about his favorite sword, the Levin sword, which has lightning properties added to it as well. Now, the reason I like Robin so much is because of my old glory days with him in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, or just Smash 4 as we call it now. I used to only play Smash 4 since I didn't have any money to buy any other games on the Wii U because, well, I was just a broke college student at the time. I remember liking Robin's gameplay style in Smash, and also remember liking how he was as a unit in Awakening, so I learned how to use him. I played Robin in many tournaments and even won a couple in my region since nobody really knew how to play against him. It wasn't easy to learn how to use Robin, especially pre-patch Robin, but it really paid off with a few prizes that I won in tournaments and just competing in high-stakes tournaments with him as my main. But despite all that, I still chose to put him at number 4 because even though he is a pivotal character to the story of Awakening, he just doesn't compare to the top 3 characters on my list. And let's be real here, this is a pivotal moment in the video if you guys are still with me. So we're about to get into the top 3 lords, so why don't you guys just leave a like on the video for me if you're enjoying it so far, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with videos like this. It really would mean a lot to me. Thank you guys. Alright, now then, back to the video with number 3. One thing I noticed about Fire Emblem, or when I made the video about the 7 best Fire Emblem games, is that I got a few people wondering about another particular game, one that I had never played before, so it felt like I needed to get on that and see for myself just what I was missing. And I gotta say, it was quite the pleasant surprise, or at least thus far, that is. The character, or should I say characters, for number 3 is Alm and Celica from Shadows of Valentia. I thought about making them both their own separate entry at first, but I decided against that since there is a sort of connection and parallel that these two characters share with one another that shapes them into the people they become later in the game. Even though I've yet to finish Echoes, I've really been enjoying the story thus far, and the dynamics between Alm and Celica are fantastic. Besides being just love interests for each other, it's also the way both of their value systems that they follow. Celica believes in the divine faith, while Alm believes in personal growth through hardships and perseverance. As kids, they both discover they have similar marks on them that already creates this sort of bond between them. An incident happens that leads Celica to flee Ram Village, and the two vow to reunite one day. Both characters grow up in different environments in different ways, which leads to their beliefs and value systems clashing with one another by the end of Act 2. In fact, there are many times where Alm's values clash with many other characters that cause him to have to overcome many hardships. Like I said, I have not quite beaten the game, but so far I have been loving the story of these two protagonists and would like to finish it before formulating a full synopsis on the overall story. But now I understand just what people were talking about with this particular game, and I can't wait to see just how it all ends.
You'll die! Die! Die!
Fatality.
By the end of this list, you might notice a pattern of these last few lords and why they are so incredible. Since the next character on my list happens to come from another game that many think very highly of, the game itself truly stands out at the top as one of the greatest in the series alongside one of the most badass female lords in any Fire Emblem game. That's right, baby. I'm talking about Edelgard from Fire Emblem Three Houses. I had to think long and hard about this one since it has been a while since I last played Three Houses. Claude was almost a contender to take this spot, but there was one little detail I remembered about Edelgard that made me rethink my decision, so just hear me out. In Three Houses, there are 3 stories of course to choose from, each with their own set of characters to command in battle, much like with Fates, but done infinitely better in my opinion. And I know that was mostly due to the hardware limitations, why they had to split Fates into 3 games and all that, but still it doesn't make it seem any less money hungry from Nintendo. Anyways, each branching story has a lord, from Claude with the Golden Deer to Dimitri of the Blue Lions, and of course Edelgard of the Black Eagles. Choosing Dimitri and the Blue Lions will have you siding with the Church of Seros by the end of the game to defeat Edelgard. And boy does she not mess around, transforming into a powerful creature to defeat you, all for the sake of her ambition and grand plans. Now, what might those plans be? Well, we'll get into that really soon here. But if you choose Dimitri's story, you never really get to understand Edelgard's true ambition, only one of her goals, which is to overthrow the church, and it's a system of nobility leading the world. Instead of nobility, Edelgard believes in meritocracy, where those who have the will to put in the work are the ones who will succeed and rule regardless of birthright. This is why Dimitri became her enemy, and Byleth as well if you choose the Blue Lion route. As for Claude and the Golden Deer, Claude was not beholden to the church, unlike the Holy Kingdom of Fargus. Leading the Alliance, Claude wanted to discover the mysteries of those who slither in the dark, and eventually that is how his story ends, with you defeating Nemesis, the King of Liberation from the past. The reason why Claude didn't make the list though is because this was Edelgard's true aim from the very beginning of the game. Edelgard needed to take the throne as the new emperor, then get rid of the church's influence to gain more power and territory across Fodlan. With her extended reach across the continent, she could go on to smoke out the snakes that have been creeping around and causing crazy incidents to happen throughout Fodlan's history. Not to mention the human experiments they were conducting on people like Edelgard herself and other characters like Lysithea. This is what makes Edelgard such a fantastic character. The fact that she was playing 4D chess the entire time. She was already looking so far ahead, even further than Claude, making moves to draw out the Slitherers before anyone else could discern what was happening across the continent. The only piece of the puzzle she needed was Byleth, and during a certain point in the game, there's a moment where the game branches into basically a fourth path where you side with the church instead of Edelgard. This was without a doubt my favorite moment in the entire game. There is no doubt that Edelgard's story is the most interesting of the original 3 routes, and I hope that Nintendo makes another Fire Emblem game similar to 3 Houses that has many different branching paths that you can take throughout the entire game. I'm not exactly sure how they would be able to pull this off, having multiple paths, but just imagine having to make a choice in certain chapters of the story which can easily take you off course and down a different path, altering the entire story and potentially even flipping it on its head. And each of these different routes could even lead towards multiple different endings. Like, I would be so down for that. As for Edelgard as a unit, do I really even need to say she's a badass? She's a powerful tank that can do massive damage to enemy units. Not as much as, say, Dimitri, who is an absolute army slayer on his own, but she makes for a strong tank though. I always go back and forth on which Fire Emblem is the best between 3 Houses and Awakening, with its well-written story, the great characters, and of course, the fantastic gameplay. As complex as a character like Edelgard is, the top Fire Emblem lore that I think is the best because of his simplicity. There's no need for complex stories, no need for this man to be playing chess. If there's a problem, you just do what you gotta do to handle business. And my man Ike is the Chad you call on when you need someone to take care of said business. My man starts off as a boy learning the ropes of swordsmanship from his dear old dad, watching him lead a group of mercenaries and getting to understand why his father is highly respected by many people. Before the torch could be passed on to him traditionally though, his father meets an untimely death by the hands of the Black Knight. Before he could even grieve, the group is attacked by Dayan forces and they have no other choice but to fight down to the last until help arrives. Ike entered Gallia as a boy but quickly had to fill the shoes of a man that far exceeded him in every way, and I think he delivered in spades, taking over the Grail mercenaries, joining the Bayon army, and leading them in the charge to defeat the Mad King of Dayan. On top of all that, the man liberated a lost kingdom from the clutches of Dayan all in one game was quite a feat. It's no shock that a few Fire Emblem lords in the history of the franchise has lost a dad figure or lost their dad in some kind of way, such as Alm taking his father's life unknowingly, or Byleth losing his dad as well to the Slitherers in 3 Houses. It's not like it's something we've never seen in Fire Emblem, but I don't know why, but it's just something about Gawain getting skewered by the Black Knight in a 1v1 duel just makes you feel kinda icky inside. It leaves you wondering, like, if dear old dad was using his sword arm instead of an axe, could he have won the duel? Regardless, watching Ike grow from a boy into a man across both games and seeing him beefed up and radiant done just made me have the dumbest smile on my face when he made a return. As a unit, he's a powerhouse, and his signature weapon Ragnail allows him to attack from afar and up close. Personally, the biggest reason I like Ike is because of his sense of duty. Losing his father was tragic, but he never lost sight of himself. He never lost to grief because there were people who were still counting on him, like his sister and many members of the Grail mercenaries. And even though he wanted revenge for his father's death, he wasn't consumed by vengeance. He bided his time and grew stronger with every encounter, and when the opportunity presented itself, he pounced on the chance. A bit of a stark contrast to Edelgard. It always felt like to me that Edelgard was one of those characters that was like, either you're with me or you're not. And if it meant throwing away all things that she cared about, like her friends, her family, her retainers, whatever, she would be willing to do it, all for the sake of her goals and ambitions. Ike never came off as the type of character to fight for himself, but for those he cared about and wanted to keep safe. And this is the main reason why I decided not to put Edelgard over Ike despite having such an amazing storyline. Radiant Dawn wrapped up the conflict between him and the Black Knight beautifully in my opinion. And then we went on to slay a god with the help of Micaiah and company. The story may be a simple one, but by no means is it lackluster. And honestly, sometimes simple is actually very good. And Ike left his mark in the Fire Emblem franchise with quite the impact and will continue to be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Fire Emblem lord in the entire series. Alright, there you have it guys. Just like with my other Fire Emblem video, I had a lot of fun making this one. Plus, I've decided that I want to take more time making more videos talking about RPGs in general. I want to be able to spend more time on those videos and really put some effort into each one, and instead of just trying to release multiple videos a week. So the uploads may slow down, but they will be better quality. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if so, be sure to hit that like button for your boy and subscribe for more on other RPG related content like this if you haven't already. It really helps me grow the channel. Either way, I appreciate you guys all the same, and with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.